Chosen ones, this is completely unacceptable. God will not tolerate this any longer. Ladies and gentlemen, today is not just another message, not just another moment in time. This is a divine interruption. This is a spiritual announcement. This is a line being drawn in the unseen world that will forever separate who you are from who you are becoming. There are moments when the universe grows quiet, when destiny leans in, and when a higher order of truth steps forward to say, enough is enough. And if you are hearing this right now, it is because something about your journey has reached that sacred tipping point. You have been patient. You have been understanding. You have been forgiving far beyond what most would tolerate. You have allowed people to misunderstand you, misuse you, delay you, and diminish you, all while keeping your heart open and your spirit intact. But what many did not realize is that your endurance was never weakness. Your silence was never surrender. Your restraint was never permission. It was preparation. It was a higher intelligence holding back the tide until the moment was right for justice, alignment, and divine correction to be released. There is an invisible ledger in the universe that records not only what is done, but how it is done. It records intentions. It records betrayals. It records moments when your worth was ignored, when your loyalty was exploited, and when your light was treated as something ordinary. And now that ledger has reached its final page. What was allowed to pass in silence will no longer pass without consequence. What was excused in the name of patience will no longer be excused in the name of progress. You are not here by accident. You are here because your consciousness has outgrown the environment that tried to contain it. You are here because the identity you once carried has been shed, and a new version of you has stepped forward, a version that knows its value, recognizes its power, and no longer negotiates with disrespect. Reality must now rearrange itself to reflect who you have become on the inside. And when reality does not shift voluntarily, it is forced to. There is something deeply sacred about a person who continues to love, believe, and rise after being hurt. And when that sacredness is violated, when it is taken lightly, when it is treated as disposable, the universe does not remain neutral. A higher order of law steps in. Balance is restored, not through chaos, but through correction. Not through revenge, but through alignment. What you are witnessing now, in your life, in your relationships, in your circumstances, is not random. Doors are closing. Masks are falling, energies are shifting. People who once had access to you suddenly feel distant. Situations that once felt normal now feel uncomfortable. This is not loss. This is purification. This is the removal of everything that cannot travel with you into your next level of existence. So today, as we enter this message, understand this: something that was once tolerated has now become unacceptable. Something that was once overlooked is now being addressed. Something that once tried to hold you down is about to be exposed for what it truly is. The season of quiet endurance is ending, and the season of divine realignment is beginning. You are not being punished. You are being repositioned. You are not being forgotten. You are being protected. And what happens next will prove that the universe always defends what is chosen. Say any longer, when something is sacred, it is protected by laws far beyond what the physical eye can see. Your spirit, your calling, your inner knowing, your capacity to believe when everything said you shouldn't, that was never ordinary. Yet there were people and situations that treated what was holy as if it were disposable. They crossed lines they never should have crossed. They spoke to you in ways that contradicted your worth. They dismissed your heart as if it were replaceable, and the unseen world recorded every moment. There is a misunderstanding many have about divine order. They think that silence means approval. They think that patience means permission. They think that because consequences did not arrive immediately, nothing was wrong. But higher law does not operate on human timing. It operates on spiritual accuracy. And when the balance is finally disturbed enough, correction becomes inevitable. What was done to you was not just hurtful. It was out of alignment with the truth of who you are. That is why it could not remain unaddressed. You were not attacked because you were weak. You were targeted because your presence disrupted something in others. Your light revealed what they were hiding from themselves. Your self-belief threatened their insecurity. Your authenticity challenged their false identity. And instead of rising to meet their own potential, they tried to lower yours. That is the deepest form of disrespect, not just toward you, but toward the higher intelligence that shaped you. Every chosen soul carries a frequency that cannot be duplicated. It is a combination of awareness, purpose, and inner authority. When someone attempts to suppress that frequency, to manipulate it, to diminish it, they are not just hurting a person, they are defying the order that placed that person where they are. And higher law does not ignore defiance. It responds to it. You may have wondered why you were allowed to go through what you did, why you had to endure betrayal, neglect, misrepresentation, and emotional injury while you were trying to do right. But the truth is, the experience was revealing who you really were. You did not become small. You did not become bitter. You did not lose your capacity to love, dream, and believe. That resilience itself was evidence of something divine moving through you. And when something divine is mishandled, the universe takes notice. What was done to you created a spiritual imbalance. It was not simply unfair, it was incorrect. It violated a higher standard. It contradicted the truth of your being. And that is why circumstances have begun to shift. That is why people who once had access to you are now losing their grip. That is why what once felt stable is now shaking. The unseen world is correcting what was misaligned. There are forces that operate through assumption and expectation. What people believe about themselves and others determines how they behave, what they allow, and what they attract. Those who treated you poorly did so because they held assumptions that were out of harmony with your true identity. They saw you through the lens of their own limitation, and that distorted perception produced distorted action. But higher law does not allow false assumptions about a chosen one to remain unchallenged forever. Your inner awareness has been evolving. You have begun to see yourself differently. You no longer accept crumbs where abundance belongs. You no longer excuse behavior that disrespects your value. You no longer shrink to keep others comfortable. That shift within you has sent a signal into the fabric of reality. The old agreements are no longer valid. And when the agreements change, the treatment must change. What offended the higher order was not just the pain inflicted on you, but the ignorance of your worth. When someone refuses to recognize the light in another, they block themselves from the truth. And when they persist in that blindness, they invite correction. That is why some are now facing resistance, delay, confusion, and loss. It is not because you wished harm upon them. It is because law demands balance. You were always more than what they could see. You were always greater than what they tried to define. And even when you doubted yourself, something within you kept rising. That something was the same power that now says, this cannot continue. The same intelligence that formed your dreams is now standing up for your dignity. There is no such thing as accidental suffering in a universe governed by consciousness. Everything that happened was revealing where alignment was missing. And now that alignment is being restored. You may notice people suddenly realizing what they lost. You may see apologies that arrive too late. You may witness reversals where those who once stood above you now feel beneath you. This is not punishment. This is the natural consequence of misjudging something sacred. Your journey was never about proving yourself to anyone. It was about remembering who you are. And now that remembrance has reached a level where it can no longer be ignored. The universe responds not to what you say, but to what you know. And you now know that you deserve honor, respect, and recognition. What was unacceptable is no longer being overlooked. The chapter where you were taken for granted has closed. The energy that once tolerated disrespect has shifted into one that commands reverence. And that is why your life is changing. Not because you demanded it, but because the truth of who you are now requires it. Everything that happens from here forward will reflect this new standard. You will be met with different energy. You will be treated with greater care. You will be surrounded by what matches your elevated awareness. Because once the divine within you is recognized, it cannot be denied again. There comes a moment in every chosen one's journey when the tests quietly stop. Not because the world has suddenly become kinder, but because the inner state has finally shifted. You were never being punished, you were being refined. Every delay, every disappointment, every moment when things didn't go your way was shaping how you see yourself. And now the image you hold of who you are has crossed a threshold that reality cannot ignore. For a long time, life was asking you one question over and over again. Do you know who you are? Do you know your value even when you are overlooked? Do you know your worth even when you are rejected? Do you know your power even when you feel alone? You answered those questions not with words, but with persistence. You kept going when you had every reason to quit. You kept believing when circumstances gave you nothing to support that belief. And with every moment of endurance, something within you grew stronger. A new self-concept was forming, one that no longer depended on external approval to exist. That is why the era of testing is now ending. Tests are only required when the outcome is uncertain. But now there is nothing left to prove. You have already demonstrated who you are by the way you survived, by the way you rose, and by the way you refused to let your experiences turn you into something small. The world you lived in before was built around an older version of you, a version that doubted, that tolerated, that tried to earn love and validation. That version attracted lessons designed to wake you up. Those lessons were not meant to stay forever. They were meant to push you into a deeper awareness of yourself. And once that awareness is reached, the lesson has no more purpose. You may notice that things that once felt heavy no longer affect you the same way. The opinions of others do not carry the same weight. The past does not have the same emotional grip. Situations that once triggered fear now feel distant and unimportant. This is not numbness, this is elevation. You have moved beyond the frequency that required struggle to grow. When the inner state changes, the outer world must follow. This is a law of consciousness. Reality does not respond to effort, it responds to identity. And your identity has shifted from someone who was learning their worth to someone who knows it. That shift alone changes everything. You are no longer energetically available for what once drained you. People who thrived on your uncertainty no longer feel comfortable around you. Situations that relied on your self-doubt can no longer survive in your presence. This is not because you have become harsh, it is because you have become clear. And clarity is powerful. The end of testing does not mean the end of growth. It means the beginning of alignment. You are no longer being pushed through difficulty to discover who you are. You are now being guided into experiences that reflect who you have already become. This is where reward replaces resistance. You may see opportunities appearing where there were none. You may notice support showing up unexpectedly. You may feel a strange sense of being carried instead of constantly struggling. This is not luck. This is the result of a self-concept that has reached a level where the universe can finally say yes without hesitation. Those who knew you in your season of becoming may not recognize you now. That is because they are still relating to a version of you that no longer exists. The old you survived, the new you commands. And that command is not spoken, it is assumed. Every time you chose self-respect over self-sacrifice, you were ending a test. Every time you refused to accept less than what felt right, you were closing a chapter. Every time you believed in your future even when the present was painful, you were stepping into a new identity. And that identity no longer matches struggle. The universe is not interested in keeping you in trial once you have learned the lesson. It is interested in reflecting back the consciousness you now carry. You are no longer aligned with lack, rejection, or delay. You are aligned with fulfillment, recognition, and flow. This is why things are beginning to feel different. You are not waiting anymore, you are expecting. You are not hoping, you are knowing. And that knowing is what shifts timelines. The people who once underestimated you may now feel confused by your confidence. The circumstances that once limited you may now seem to open effortlessly. This is what happens when you outgrow the stage you were playing on. The scenery has to change. You did not graduate because life became easier. You graduated because you became stronger in your awareness of who you are. And now the world must meet you at that level. When someone reaches out and touches what is sacred without reverence, a law is set into motion that cannot be undone. It is not a law of punishment, it is a law of balance. You were never meant to be mishandled, misused, or minimized. Yet some people did exactly that, not because you invited it, but because they did not recognize the spiritual weight of what stood before them. They mistook your kindness for weakness, your patience for permission, and your quiet strength for something that could be taken lightly. But there is a deeper order that governs everything. Every thought carries a frequency. Every intention creates a ripple. And every action plants a seed that must eventually grow into something. Those who chose to treat you carelessly planted seeds that are now reaching their season of harvest. This is not something you orchestrated. This is something the universe itself is now completing. They made assumptions about you that were never true. They assumed you would always be available. They assumed you would always forgive. They assumed you would always stay in places that disrespected you. Those assumptions shaped their behavior, and their behavior shaped their reality. Now, the reality they are facing is the mirror of what they once projected onto you. You may notice them struggling in areas that once seemed effortless. You may see relationships breaking down, plans falling apart, or a general sense of instability surrounding them. This is not coincidence. It is the echo of their own inner state returning to them. When someone acts from entitlement, manipulation, or disregard, they align themselves with a frequency that eventually creates disorder. You do not have to lift a finger for this to happen. In fact, your role was never to seek justice. Your role was to rise. And as you rose, the distance between you and those who wronged you created a vacuum that exposed their true foundation. What was built on false assumptions cannot stand when the truth enters the room. The correction they are experiencing is not cruel. It is precise. It is designed to show them where they lost alignment. Some may come to realize how they treated you. Some may not. But the law does not wait for awareness, it responds to energy. What makes this especially powerful is that you did not respond in kind. You did not become bitter. You did not seek revenge. You simply shifted your state. And that shift was enough to trigger a rebalancing of the entire equation. Those who touched what was sacred without honor are now facing the weight of their own actions. They are being forced to confront the emptiness of the beliefs that guided them. And that confrontation is uncomfortable. It feels like loss, confusion, and resistance. But it is actually alignment trying to be restored. You were the standard they failed to meet. And now life is showing them what it feels like to be on the other side of that standard. Not because you asked for it, but because truth cannot be suppressed forever. There is a quiet dignity in the way the universe handles these things. It does not announce its intentions. It simply rearranges circumstances until balance is achieved. And as that balance returns, you find yourself standing in a new position, one of peace, clarity, and strength. You may feel lighter, more grounded, less attached to the past. That is because the energetic contract that once bound you to their actions has been dissolved. You are no longer in the same story. They, however, are still working through the consequences of the one they wrote. And until they change their inner assumptions, they will keep encountering the same patterns in different forms. This is not about their downfall. It is about your freedom. The moment you were released from the weight of their treatment, a new path opened. And that path leads forward, not backward. You are no longer defined by what they did. You are defined by who you have become. And that is the greatest form of justice there is. There is a point in every transformation where the old world begins to feel unfamiliar. The places, the people, the routines that once seemed normal suddenly feel out of alignment. This is not confusion, it is recalibration. You have changed internally, and now the external environment is being forced to update itself to match the new version of you. What you are witnessing is not chaos, it is reconfiguration. Your identity is the blueprint from which reality is constructed. For a long time, your outer life was built around a self that was still discovering its power. That version tolerated what it should not have tolerated. It settled for what it should not have accepted. It stayed quiet when it should have spoken. But that version no longer exists. A new self has emerged, one that knows, without effort, that it is worthy of more. When the inner blueprint changes, the outer structure must follow. And when the outer structure resists that change, it begins to crack. That is why relationships are shifting. That is why opportunities are appearing or disappearing without warning. That is why you feel as though you are being pulled in a new direction. Reality is being forced to catch up to who you have become. There is no force more powerful than a self-concept that has evolved. You no longer see yourself as someone who must earn love, fight for attention, or beg for respect. You now see yourself as someone who naturally deserves these things. That subtle but profound shift changes the way every person and situation interacts with you. The world you used to live in was designed for the old you. It reflected your doubts, your compromises, and your attempts to be accepted. The world you are moving into reflects your certainty, your boundaries, and your quiet confidence. And because those two worlds cannot coexist, one must fall away. You may feel a sense of detachment from your past. Things that once mattered deeply now feel irrelevant. This is not loss, this is transcendence. You are no longer emotionally anchored to what no longer matches you. And as you let go, something new is being created in its place. There is a higher intelligence orchestrating this shift. It is not random, it is precise. Every door that closes is doing so because it no longer leads where you are going. Every person who drifts away is doing so because their role in your story has been fulfilled. And every new connection that appears is aligned with the next chapter of your life. You do not have to force this process. In fact, the more you try to control it, the more resistance you will feel. This transformation is happening because you have changed, and change at that level cannot be undone. You may notice that you are attracting different kinds of people. Those who respect you, who listen to you, who treat you as an equal. You may also notice that those who once took you for granted no longer have access to you. This is not because you have built walls, it is because you have built awareness. Your new reality is not being created by effort. It is being created by alignment. You are in harmony with a higher version of yourself, and everything that is not in harmony with that version is being removed. This is why it can feel uncomfortable at times. You are standing between two worlds, the one that shaped you and the one that reflects you. The space between them is where growth happens. Trust what is unfolding. Even when you do not understand it, it is working in your favor. The universe is not taking things away to punish you. It is making room to provide you with what you truly deserve. Your new life is not something you have to chase. It is something that is meeting you where you stand. What was once allowed is now completely forbidden. That is not because the world has changed, it is because you have. There was a time when you tolerated what hurt you. You explained away what disrespected you. You made excuses for what drained you. But that version of you no longer exists. A new awareness has taken its place, and that awareness does not negotiate with anything that threatens your peace, your dignity, or your destiny. Boundaries are not walls, they are laws. They define what is permitted to exist in your reality. And now, new laws have been written within you. You are no longer energetically available for emotional neglect. You are no longer aligned with one-sided effort. You are no longer open to being misunderstood, undervalued, or overlooked. These things do not match the frequency you now hold. When someone tries to treat you the way they used to, it feels uncomfortable for them, not for you. That discomfort is the signal that the old contract has expired. They can no longer interact with you from a place of entitlement because you no longer carry the identity that allowed it. There is an invisible force protecting this new version of you. It shows up as missed calls that turn into missed connections. It shows up as doors that refuse to open no matter how much someone knocks. It shows up as delays that prevent you from being in the wrong place at the wrong time. What once would have pulled you into old patterns is now blocked by unseen hands. This is not isolation. This is insulation. You are being preserved for something greater. The reason this protection exists is because your consciousness has reached a level where it must be guarded. You are no longer learning who you are embodying it. And what you embody becomes the law of your life. Those who try to bring you back into pain will find that their efforts fall flat. They may attempt to guilt you, to manipulate you, to remind you of who you used to be. But that version of you is gone. And the more they try to access it, the more obvious it becomes that they are out of alignment with your present reality. You do not have to announce these boundaries. You do not have to explain yourself. Your energy does the speaking. The way you show up, the way you carry yourself, the way you respond, all of it communicates that you are no longer available for what once hurt you. This is what it means to be spiritually protected. It is not about avoiding difficulty. It is about no longer being drawn into what does not serve you. You may notice that certain patterns are simply not repeating. The same type of person no longer enters your life. The same kind of conflict no longer arises. The same old disappointments no longer appear. That is because the frequency that created them is no longer active within you. You are not being tested anymore. You are being honored. And what is honored must be respected. The door to abuse, disrespect, and disregard is not just closed, it is sealed. And everything that comes to you now will come through a higher standard. You have stepped into a reality where only what matches your worth is allowed to remain.